friends and fans. I'm the author David Applegate, author of the book The Boyhood of Cade, Book 1 of the Empire of Elves, and welcome to Future Fantasy Empire. Today, with me is Thomas Kane, the author of The Mayor of the League series. Thomas, please introduce yourself.
Hey, well, maybe the first thing I should say is that I am a child of the 1970s. And as I was talking about with David, back then you would often see radio announcers that were having trouble with their headphones, and so they would have to you know, play with them to get the sound to come through. And I am having that experience tonight. So if you wonder why I am holding my head, that is your answer. And focusing on the reason why I'm here, I'm a fantasy author. And my books tend to have a lot of political intrigue, a lot of spying, um, a lot of warfare, military action. I hope that they're exciting. And in addition to having the scheming and espionage and that side of political intrigue, I also go into some depth about what my characters believe and why they are doing the things they do, and how they feel about it. Character is a major part of my writing, and I have a foundation for all of this from my former career as a political scientist. I taught international relations at a British university for 18 years, and I've written a fair number of nonfiction books on world politics and military strategy and things like that.
Wow, an international expert, because I actually have a couple of channels. I have a channel where I give people an update on the Ukraine war, but we won't discuss that here. But it's actually interesting to meet an actual expert. I don't claim to be one, but it does lend, I believe, to making good fiction. I mean, rewriting history is, a lot of the source material for many a book. When did you realize you wanted to make the crossover to fiction writing?
I think the truth is I wanted to be a fiction writer before I wanted to be an academic. In fact, one of my main motivations for becoming an academic was to have a chance to write on the side. I think you could tell the story of my educational career of me sort of looking for ways to pursue my aspirations to write while also making a living. I started out at university with a very practical goal. I was going to become a pharmacist, and I told myself that while studying pharmacy, I would learn a lot. I would learn a certain amount about science, and science is interesting. And I would learn about drugs and poisons and things like that would be interesting, and I could do something in terms of writing with those. And in the course of studying pharmacy, well, I never actually made it to pharmacy school. In the course as an undergraduate, taking basic classes in science and chemistry, I took a class in international relations and had an amazing professor, and sort of got pulled over from preparing for pharmacy school to preparing to study politics. And again, the excitement of the subject was part of what drew me, and the idea that I would someday use this in fiction was part of what drew me. But meanwhile, since I was not yet a best-selling author, I carried on with what you do in politics, which is to pursue advanced studies and eventually teach it myself, and did do that, and did, as I mentioned, write a number of academic nonfiction books in my field. And then as my career developed and as my life developed, I had an opportunity to switch into writing fiction, and it made sense to take it. And if you want to know more about my life story, I write, what I hope will be humorous and colorful and interesting to people other than myself, bits of it, in my author's newsletter.
That is the that is attach your newsletter link to the Twitter notification later, and I'll add it to the add it. I think. But tell us more about the Mara of the League.
Okay. Well, the basic idea of the Mara of the League series is it's about a woman who spends most of her life as a spy, and in the course of her spying, she comes to realize that her country's main rival, a different country which is very powerful, is planning to invade. And this is an idea that a lot of people in her world find sort of unthinkable, partially because war. Everyone understands correctly that that war would be terrible. War could destroy civilization. People think that there is no way even our enemies would risk that. But Mara becomes certain that their enemies would indeed risk that. That their enemies are working themselves into a position from which they can invade and succeed. And so she has to convince her rulers to act on this. A historical parallel would be maybe Winston Churchill in the 1930s, warning that Hitler was actually going to be a threat. That German rearmament was something Britain had to take seriously. And another parallel, which might be slightly more controversial, but I take on some controversial subjects in my writings, might be the Cold War. Mara has one point of view about about what Mara's point of view could also be translated into how do people in America, Australia, Britain, how do people in the West, as we say, see the Soviet Union and communism. And in real life, a lot of people thought that we should be looking for an accommodation with the Soviet Union, and other people were saying, no, it's dangerous. And in my fictional world, Mara is on the side saying it's dangerous, and in my fictional world, this is kind of a spoiler, but if you look at the covers of my books, you're going to figure it out. In the end, things do fall apart. There is a major war, and Mara finds herself having to take a central part in it. So that, in essence, is what the series is about. Another analogy I use, moving away from 20th century history and moving toward sort of classical mythology, I say that the Mara of the League series is my take on the Cassandra myth. Because again, I trust most people are familiar with it. Cassandra was a princess in Troy. Troy was rivals with. We usually say Troy was rivals with Greece. I think it would be more accurate to say the Achaeans. But in any case, Greece and Troy were rivals, and Cassandra had the gift of prophecy, and she was prophesying. The Greeks are going to come. The Greeks are going to attack us. The Greeks are going to offer us a big horse, and it would be a really bad idea to bring that horse inside the walls, a big wooden horse, and no one would believe her. And the Cassandra myth is about having the gift of prophecy, but not being able to convince people that you're right. And my Mara of the League series is about that. And another thing that my Mara of the League series is about is how does Mara foresee these things? What is it about her that allows her to see the enemy's plan? Because unlike Cassandra, Mara does not have magic. She doesn't like have a psychic insight about the future. She watches what's happening in the world, and she looks at the evidence, and she makes the deduction that the enemy is planning an attack. So I am drawing on, what
geopolitics,
my real life knowledge, such as it is. I like to think I know something. Didn't totally waste the first 20 years of my life. So I draw on what I know about history, and I ask what kind of person will pick up on the clues. what kind of person will make accurate connections and see the danger that lies ahead.
I believe it's a combination of puzzle solving, logic, and curiosity.
I like that.
It's
curiosity. I'm always in favor of curiosity and logic too.
And logic, curiosity and logic gave us science.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, puzzle solving and you're right. A lot of people don't know Troy was one of many city-states outside of Greece that had pretty much declared themselves independent well over 150, 200 years prior. But the region was known as Anatolia. It was made up actually of many small cities, but Troy was the largest of them all. And they had outgrown the size of Greece. But because they were so divided, the Athenians had devised a plan, which was later the, I would say the, what would you call it? The outline for Alexander's later conquests.
And I'm sure Alexander enjoyed that thought.
Yes, looking at the intrigue and the plots and all the work that was done years and sometimes decades ahead of time to get these armies to all believe that Troy was a threat to each ruler.
Yeah.
But in Alexander's case, his father did all the footwork, and then at the last minute decided, no, we'll destroy civilization. And Alexander stabbed his father, well, had him assassinated according to some, and the rest is history. 33 years later, civilization did collapse.
That's right.
I think a lot of people don't understand. The first casualty of war is the plan. Alexander did not learn that lesson from his study of the Trojan Wars. That because there were more than one, and by the end it had destroyed all of Greek's heroes, destroyed half their cities, decimated Athens, and later led the path for Persian invasion.
Yeah.
And those wars led to the Romans coming in and saying, oh, pluck, pluck, pluck.
Yes, indeed. Well, I think, at least according to one telling of the events, the fugitives from Troy founded Rome. Aeneas.
Not just the fugitives of Troy, but also other Greek cities that had fallen along the way, including Carthage, which, believe it or not, later became an enemy of Rome. But yes, generals in Carthage who saw Greece as a threat, they helped found Rome, but then Rome became a threat to them. That's the thing about geopolitics. It's always, this guy's a threat, so we'll create a counter threat. And sometimes, as Orwell predicted, more likely than not, they'll become your enemy. And you have a three-way tussle, which ends in endless wars. Which, if you get the point of Orwell, it is the end of civilization as you know it.
Orwell's a smart writer.
Oh, he was, like you, started as an academic. He was a Ministry of Information. He's BBC and Oxford and the Ministry of Information, which I think still exists. They just don't say they exist.
I would not doubt it.
I think they call themselves the Guardians Against Misinformation now, or whatever it is at GHCQ. Yes.
There was certainly...
you've got such a great academic background. So what do you do to prepare for a new book?
Well, what I seriously do to prepare for a new book is I write lots of notes. I've been fortunate with my books so far in that I've had authentic inspiration for all of them. So someday I will get to a point where I need to write a new book, and I have to I have to stop and think about what to write it about. But so far, I've been blessed to have the ideas in advance, and I will typically go through a period of sort of like collecting ideas, and at some point, the ideas start to come together and make sense, and I will start to get inspiration for lines I want to write in the book, and I will think about how I want them to sound, and I will try to write them all down in as close as possible to the order I'm going to use them in. So the book sort of comes together that way, and I attempt to outline it to make sure that these ideas are going to go to an exciting conclusion and not go off into the ether. But the truth is, it's for me, it's a very organic process. It's the ideas come together into a story sort of on their own. I guess people talk about being a plotter and planning everything in advance, and a pantser and making everything up as you go along. And I wouldn't really say I was a pantser, because I do usually know, but I usually know in advance what's going to happen. But my my plot, my outline, my organized plan tends to come. It tends to be some pantsing in advance, and then I have a plot. But by the time I actually sit at my computer and write things down, by then there actually is some plotting. If that makes any sense.
Absolutely. You pants. I pants. I think everybody does it at some time. You have to have the original creative spark. And once you have the characters, you have right inciting incident. You got to plot that out. The mid story, the what have I done? Where's it all gone wrong? And then the resolution. So yeah, I think everybody's in that triangle of you got your pantsing and your plotting, and then you got your results. You're trying to bring those two into a nice, neat stack.
Bring them together.
Yes. Now, do you have a favorite author or a particular writer? Some might be the particular book that you like or prefer.
If I was going to sort of pick one, it would probably need to be Tolkien. I think like many people who write fantasy, Tolkien sort of awakened me to the possibilities of the genre. And Tolkien, I discovered Tolkien at 11 years old. I discovered Tolkien early, and so Tolkien sort of molded not only my writing life, but pretty much everything about my life. Moving on from there, another writer that I deeply admire is Ursula K. Le Guin. And when I started writing myself, it was actually Ursula K. Le Guin's book Tanahu that sort of moved me into writing the Mara of the League series. And I liked it, first of all, because Le Guin is an amazing writer. And second of all, because Tanahu is somewhat different from a lot of fantasy books. It is very much in one character's head, and this character is not even especially. She's not a warrior. She's not a sorceress. She's just an ordinary woman trying to live an ordinary life, and the story is about her, and it works. It's powerful and exciting and moving, and you sort of like see her perspective on things and see see how she has like interesting thoughts about the things she's talking about. And my books are a little more action oriented than Tanahu. As I said, Mara, Mara says she's not a warrior, but she does get into some fights. So my books are not quite as domestically oriented as Tanahu was, but they do focus a lot on ideas and on the character's experience of the world. I'm trying to give readers a sense of what is it like to be Mara? And Le Guin, with her very psychological book, sort of paved the way for me to do that. Sort of showed me how that could be done.
I think
so. Those are. I mean, of course, I mean, like so many of us, I could go on all day about authors that I've loved. But though Tolkien and Le Guin are two authors that sort of make a nice path, step to my own writing.
I started with Tolkien. My grandmother was huge on Agatha Christie, so like I had Tolkien and like every Agatha Christie book. I mean, we're talking 2 full shelves, like arm's length across, full of Agatha. I didn't know she'd written that many novels, that many. And of course, Alistair MacLean. She had a lot of the Alistair MacLean action series, particularly Guns of Neverone and stuff like that. I read them long before the movies, what else was there? There was Arthur C. Clarke, Asimov. But of course, I kept circling back, fairy tale books, and I started getting my hands on and so after The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion, The Lost Tales, and of course you sort of feel wanting more. So I actually got into fairy tales and actual legends and lore, and well, I put things off for a long time. Did some traveling, got married, and did stuff, and then wrote my book. And it's a long journey. Actually, it took me longer to write the sequels than it did the first book. But each time you are actually have somebody else who has paved the way for you. I think everybody, there's the first spy novels I encountered were rather dry, Cold War stuff where they're watching each other and what is it and trying to work out what the other guy is thinking, very dry stuff. And that's, I think, Ian Fleming exploded with his basically turning spies into government hitmen. No, government would never do that. So when it comes to writing, what advice would you give a new writer?
Well, I think where I would start it would be, I would say that I think that I would say look at Anne Rice's website, because I admire the advice Anne Rice gives new writers. And what I admire about it is that it's basically encouragement. I mean, Anne Rice's point of view is you have a vision for your story, and no one else has quite the vision you have, and go out there and make other people feel what you're feeling inside. Show other people what you have, and don't let anyone tell you can't. And I recommend this approach in the full awareness that writers at a certain stage of learning their craft, as they say, if you're like a hip and cool writer, you call it your craft. Writer, when you're starting out, you actually do need more than Anne Rice is offering you, and I certainly needed more. And if I had a beginning writer that wanted me to talk about, about what else do you need? In other words, if I had someone who was at a stage where they actually did want sort of to be told what to do, to be told how to construct a good sentence, how to make a character interesting. Well, then I would do my best to talk about what I think and what seems to have worked for me and what seems to work for other people who seem to have been successful. But I would go back to Anne Rice saying, "Follow your heart," because so much of the writing advice that one sees online, for instance, is so prescriptive and so controlling and so passive aggressive and so nasty. And and I would I think that one of the things that one needs as a writer is one needs to be able to ignore that kind of writing advice. One needs to be able to break free from it, and it often it often intrigues me that as writers, presumably we're interested in words. We're interested in the way words are used, and nevertheless, we put up with people who have these, as I say, very passive aggressive, very manipulative ways of giving advice that undermine your confidence and make you subservient to them. And it sort of seems to me that as writers, even as writers who admit that we can improve our work, and as writers who are trying to learn and trying to listen to people that might be able to help us, in addition to listening to people who may be able to help us, we should also be able to pick out people that are not trying to help us, and people who are using words in aggressive ways. And I was about to say call that out. Maybe sometimes it's just you don't want to argue with these people. I don't like to get in arguments online, but at very least know that you don't have to pay attention to that kind of stuff.
I did a video on it.
You can ultimately, even if Anne Rice's advice, even if Anne Rice's advice is not enough, even if you need more than follow your heart, in the end, you do want to get back to following your heart. That's ultimately what it's all about.
Yes, I did a video on it. I don't mean to sound nasty, but I think why I don't listen to Stephen King, it resonated with a lot of people because those who know Stephen King know how self-serving he is when it comes to anything. And you've got to remember, he had no competition, he had friends in the industry, and he was given his big break with his first novel because there was a gap between, oh, we needed a horror book this month, we don't have one. Oh, here's Stephen King, and then, oh yeah, Stephen, he's Maine, he's one of us, blue blood and link, went to the right schools, so forth, knew all the right people. So that kind of advice, that networking, sure, it worked for Stephen King, but do you realize for every Stephen King, there are over 1 million people who tried the same thing and failed because they didn't follow their heart. They didn't write the book they wanted to write, I think Anne Rice, she's not the only one, but there's a lot of people who are going to be bombarded every day with editors, and I recently come across a blog where somebody says they're not editors, they're predators. I was going to do something on it last week, but then I came across. I didn't have enough material at the time, so I did a video on common writing mistakes. Because here's the thing: every writer's going to make mistakes. This is your personality coming through. Don't I think we over perfect. We expect every writer to be McLean or I'm trying to think of somebody else who come out of the 70s really big. Ian Fleming. We need a spy novel. Oh, this one will do. It's only £10,000. It's like, oh, have I lost Tom? We'll wait and see. I probably rambled on too much. We'll wait see if Tom can make it back. Whoops. I'm waiting for a message back. I probably rambled on too much. He fell asleep. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, everybody. This happens. Technical difficulties. See if he hasn't lost his internet connection. If he's able to make it back. So what I'll do is I'll actually bring up Tom's book. He's actually got a couple of books here. Yeah, so here's a series in the box set, Amazon, the complete series. Give him a proper plug. I mean, had the decency to come. He is back. Right, I was about to screen share your series, waiting for you to come back, but it was slow loading. I was going to read everybody the synopsis on your series, but you've actually done a pretty good job of outlining it already. How's the sound? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Right.
For the first time tonight.
Yes, for the first time tonight. Well, I was going to ask you about inspiration. A lot of authors, new authors, and you pretty much covered a lot of it. But is there any other source of inspiration you have?
No, as you say, we've talked about books that got me started, and we've talked about sort of my academic career and fact that I've spent a lot of my life exploring history and strategy and spying and so forth. I mean, current events are all too inspirational these days. I will say that a certain amount of what goes on in my books is stuff that I wanted to say online and knew I would get in trouble if I said it. I mean, I'm not. That's actually a somewhat serious comment. I would here is sort of my perspective as somewhat of my generation, my age. I would say that when I was, a college student, when I was in my 20s, when I was sort of learning about history, politics, and strategy, there were a lot of things that we learned about that were, you might, to use the current term, red flags. These are things that were happening in the 1930s that were a sign that things were starting to go bad. These were things that were happening in other historical periods that were, dark. Were things that we should, those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it. Things that we should learn about and be on the lookout for. And so those are things I learned about early in my career. And then I got very sucked into my academic career, and I sort of ignored the outside world for 20, from around 2008 to around 2016, I was completely in my own bubble. And I came out, actually, we'll say 2018. But eventually I came out of the bubble and I sort of started reading the news again and started seeing what people were talking about again. And I was genuinely shocked. Things that, lessons that I thought we had learned from history had been completely forgotten. And in this world that we live in, well, of course, I was about to say you can't say that. Of course, you can say that. People say that all the time. But if you get into the same old debates, and we all know both sides in most of those debates, and they repeat themselves over and over again and never get anywhere.
Yes.
I at least, leaving aside the fact that you lose friends if you do that, I don't even think there would be any point in doing that. But so one of the things that I do try to do in my books is, say some things that I really think need to be said. And the Mara of the League series does some of this. I do even more in the sequel to the Mara of the League series, which is called The People versus Abigail Bennett.
You heard of her, folks. You heard it here first. Academics in their own bubble. I've been there. Any student who's been to university knows when you're studying, you really do. You shut down. Like your textbook becomes your best friend. It's your lover. You're stroking it. You're into it every night. It's your constant companion. So yeah, the world news. TV. I've got to study. I've got to cram. I got an exam. Current events, modern movies. Unfortunately, my academic career ended early due to a breakdown. But I do know what it's like. It is very stressful and it's very time consuming. And a lot of people think like, "Oh, I want to write the next great novel." I know. I'll become a journalist or I'll become an academic. And next thing you know, you're Hemingway sitting on the beach writing your memoir going, where did things go wrong? Because as you know, he was kicked out of Cuba. He had to hide. Where did he? I forget where he went, but his greatest works were were retirement. In Jamaica. That's it. And he wrote his greatest works in retirement in Jamaica, reflecting on the fact that. And there's a guy who actually took part in historical events sent by Britain to spy on Cuba, and what the Americans were up to.
That is true.
And I don't think he ever really told us the whole story or the whole truth, but he definitely alluded to the fact that we still don't know the truth about the revolution and the American instigations.
In Cuba.
In Cuba, yeah. That it wasn't the Soviet Union. They were late to the party. But things that need to be said, I agree. A lot of people talk past each other. We're watching historical events unfold, opportunities missed. We can go back 10, 20 years and see so many opportunities missed.
Yeah.
We'll see economic blocks become totalitarian in order to preserve their economies, and ignoring the will of the people has become all too frequent these days. And this mantra of the greater good, where the government will just basically stay the course, stick to their mantras. You have 30 years of failed predictions, left, right, and centre, in so many issues, and yet as soon as one little thing happens, they go, we were right all along. And it's like, no, you're throwing darts at a dartboard for 50 years and you hit a bullseye once. It doesn't mean you were right for the last 50 years. I think anybody who studies history is doomed to watch it repeat. Ask any historian; they'll tell you they're being called up by to committees. My father was in a committee though; he was in productivity, but he would pretty much the same thing. Be asked what to do to increase productivity and give them a long list of things. Mechanical processes. Replace all these human production lines with mechanical processes. You'll double production and use the profits to pay workers to do other things that they're underpaid for, raise the pay. The government says, we can't do that. If we issue a pay rise, there's inflation. But the point of inflation was originally to inflate the economy. I studied one of the things I was studying was economics and then accounting, because economics just got it just got to the point where if you didn't follow economic theory of the day, you were ostracized. You know what I mean? I'm sure you come across it in history and theories too, where if you don't, oh, you have people who are fanatical about the War of the Roses, and if you don't agree with the crown, you're a fanatic, and it's no. I think all too often in history, the British crown has been wrong about many instances, and but that's what you get with history, isn't it? You actually get, you don't exactly get the whole story, but there are some good stories there to be told, no doubt.
Well,
I think what you've done is taken amazing snippets of history and put them together well to tell a well-crafted tale in long form. I mean, not too many people these days appreciate long form epic tales. Now, many people do find the process stressful. Do you find the process stressful? And if so, how do you deal with it?
the process of writing.
Yes.
Um, well, I guess here's sort of what I would really say about that. It's certainly not all stressful. The more and the more the clearer I am about what I have to say, the easier and more fun it is. And and in fact that was my, speaking of inspirations, jumping back to an earlier question, one, but my parents, both of my parents, but now I'm going to be talking about my father, were great sources of inspiration to me. And my father was an editor for part of his career, and and something that he said a lot, as fathers sometimes do. So something that my father said a lot was that the secret to writing is having something to say, and once you figure out what you have to say, the writing takes care of itself. And there is a lot to that, and and so a lot of the time, writing is a lot of the time when I do know what I'm trying to say, writing is not stressful for me. The stressful thing is trying to fit it into the rest of my life. But sort of getting back to the question that you actually asked me to answer, when you are not so sure what you have to say, writing, or at least that's when I can find writing stressful. When I kind of have made time to write, and I get down and I turn on the computer, and I really, I know vaguely what I want to do, but I find nothing is working when I actually try to do it. So trying to get through those periods of uncertainty is not fun. That's not fun, and it's not, and it's more than just it's more than just looking for inspiration. At least for me, I assume other people have this experience. But my mood sinks. I get tired. There's a self-perpetuating cycle there that makes it harder and harder, and that's stressful. And how do I deal with it? I mean, seriously, focusing on like how do you make progress as a writer? The most effective way I know of dealing with it is sort of to get back to what my father was saying, to try to get specific about about exactly what it is that I have to say. What do I want to be doing? Often, so that's not exactly, but I guess I'm hemming and hawing here, because that's not exactly stress management advice. That's writing advice. But since the question was about dealing with stress when I'm writing, if if I can solve the problem of writer's block, I've solved the problem of stress in
Yes.
that particular context.
That's what I'm getting at, because what I'm alluding to is we are most productive. Now, this has been proven throughout the world, time and time again. We are most productive when we are without stress, right? And as we progress through our working periods, our stress, whether we want to or not, whether we're at calm or at peace or not, our body is tensing up the whole time. And you have mental stress, psychological stress, and emotional stress. And everybody thinks that, oh, all I have to do is either keep going, or use fear because there's the theory of fear, use fear to motivate, fear motivates. But that just gets you quicker to burnout, right? Quicker to burnout, quicker to resentment. I think most of the great writers, they've all got their own stress management, and they know, I'm going to do my writing, even if it's 10 minutes a day. And I'm not going to pick a time to write. I'm going to write when I am the least stressful, And everybody has a life to deal with. And I think it's no one person you say, right, they have the answer. No, it's I pick what works for me, drawing inspiration from other writers. And, what works for you today might not work for you tomorrow. Like you said, you as you're going through it, you're working it out. And when you're de-stressed, you've solved your writer's block,
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it definitely makes a difference of whether being tired changes everything.
Yes. Now,
for the worse.
Now, last question, and I think this is something everybody, they want to know a bit about you. So it's most common these days, to want to know something about the writers they read. What would you, what do you do when you're not writing? What's your life?
I am fortunate to live in a beautiful part of the world. I'm currently in the United States, in the state of Maine, which is, if you don't know about it, it's the part of Maine I live in is all forests. Maine is also famous for its coastline, but coastal Maine and inland Maine are sort of two different worlds. And I'm in inland Maine, in the foothills of the mountains. So on stress reduction side of things, that means beautiful places to go for a walk. On stress production side of things, that means we're in invasive vines that I need to pull up, ditches that I need to dig to keep my driveway from washing away in this year's torrential rains. I don't mean to exaggerate it, because compared to my neighbors, I do very little property management work. But the era that I live in is both a beautiful place and a place where you can do fun things, and also a place where just dealing with the environment takes up. And in the winter, shoveling snow. We must not forget shoveling snow. Where dealing with the environment just takes up a certain amount of your time.
Part of life, we've got to deal with, what's it called, the living part of living, making a living part of a living. I mean, I don't want to burst people's bubble. I mean, it's just that we don't know, almost to the day, most people don't know, are they going to be the one who writes the next big thing, or find out 20 years, a novel you wrote 20 years ago is suddenly a bestseller. Nobody predicts the moods or trends, particularly in the world of writing. It's been great talking to you. Any final words before we go?
It's been great talking with you as well. I am really really honored to be on this show, and I've enjoyed. I've I've learned a little bit about the Trojan War and how it fit into
Geopolitics,
the other
yeah.
wars of that period, and
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed hearing your thoughts.
Well, it's different then because then the between wars were sometimes hundreds of years,
Yeah,
whereas now it's almost every decade. And
yeah, that
yeah,
is something. When you read history, you read a history of the Middle Ages, and you hear, well,
yeah,
this happened, this happened, this happened, and the truth is, as you say, it happened over the course of 500 years, and you sort of it's easy to forget that.
yeah. Another thing that's easy to forget: Egypt was 5,000 years old when the last pharaoh, marrying off his daughter to the Greeks. They forget there's 5,000 something years before that, and when they go back to the pyramids, they actually find the first pharaohs didn't build the pyramids. They found the pyramids.
So someone else built them.
Somebody else. Yeah, no, there was a civilization before them, and the remnants of that civilization were just maintaining the pyramids. The stone here, replacing a stone here, replacing a stone there, and that people forget because today things move so fast. Empires back then, right? But since then, if you look at Egypt, the rise and fall of ancient empire has been faster and faster and faster. And the only one who I think has really predicted trends was Tesla, who said social media will accelerate everything, including social decline, because you spread ideas faster and faster and faster. And you do. You look at the spreading of ideas of the city state, writing. You look how it spread. It took thousands of years to spread education beyond a few cities. It took 5,000 years for Egypt to create a functioning civilization. And then it fell apart within a few decades, infighting, inbreeding, um, external wars, the barbarians at the gates. So they thought in order for Egypt to maintain peace, they had to keep attacking Nubia. And of course, that built resentment. It just went on and on from there. And I think that is the most fundamental history that is the conservative versus the progressive. The progressive wants to progress society. The conservative wants to keep things as they are. Don't go outside the boundaries. We'll create a catastrophe. We just got civilization functioning. Don't change anything. And this is why a lot of people don't like the progressives, because they'll race headlong into the fray, thinking, oh, well, if civilization collapses, we'll just build another one. So I think that people forget that political fight. It's all the way back then. The pharaohs, once they got into power, they were very conservative, but the Egyptian merchants who built this empire, they wanted to maintain the progressive stance, keep expanding the empire. So a lot of people forget the Egyptian empire started as a few city-states in central Egypt, spread down the Nile, and then they said, hey, let's go the other way. And I think if people want a more, I suppose, interesting way of looking at history, I think reading your books and that what do you say, the intrigue and the
That's what I
things
said.
that need to be said, that's where you'll find it, and it's good that you've done it this way. I think if you had written let's see, I can't quite think of it, a treatise like early Orwell, a lot of his non-fiction works, nobody knows them. I think
Seemed like
yeah,
storytelling seemed like the way to go.
yeah. I think you've done it well, and I think everybody will enjoy it.
Thank you. I hope so.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming. Please like, share, subscribe, and all the fun stuff. Now, we do have Tom's links in the description below for the Mar of the League. Of course, if you just click his author's name on Amazon, you'll get the rest of his works. Tom, any final words? Where's the rest of your books listed?
Sorry, any final words? What?
Sorry, I forgot to ask. Where is all your books on Amazon?
All of my books are on Amazon.
Right.
And you can also, I have a website, which is just thomasmkane.com. And if you go to my website, you can subscribe to my free monthly newsletter and get my coffee stories and learn about the books that I'm currently working on and have coming out.
Right. Tom, send me that link and I'll add it to the description. And thank you all for coming.
I will. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome.